Hello, welcome to my knitting reflections. Today I'm going to be reflecting on not just a bit of knitting, but also some things that are happening in my life right now. So I'll do that at the end, so if you're not interested, you can skip that. But yeah, I really feel like I've had in some senses, I guess, a tough couple of weeks. Well, probably by any stretch of the imagination, a tough couple of weeks. But yeah, it's hard because you often try and compare yourself to other people, like how hard other people are having it, which I'm obviously not trying to do here, but I know that that's not good for me. But it's hard to say that you're having a tough time when you know a lot of people are having it tougher. So just sort of honoring that feeling. Okay. I think I just needed to get into the right headspace. So one thing that has been giving me a lot of comfort in the last couple of weeks has been my knitting. As always, my knitting is the practice that I do for myself that probably gives me the most grounded feeling, the groundedness and the stability that I feel like my partner gives me a lot of that as well, but I feel like knitting is one of the things that I can do for myself consistently. I show up for myself consistently and do it, and it doesn't take any effort. So in any case, I'm gonna go through the project I finished, the project I'm working on, and I haven't really made a lot of progress on my socks, but I am done with my rug sweater. I'm super, super happy with how this turned out. It's very oversized. It has a very deep armpit. And today basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some of the things I did to change up the design. So starting off with the very top, I actually put in some instructions on what I did on my Ravelry, but for at least the beginning of the yoke, this is no longer correct because I ended up having to rip out, as I mentioned in my previous episode, a lot of the yoke because it was sort of standing up like one of those ancient Victorian collars like this rather than laying up flat across the shoulders. So what I ended up doing was I just picked up near this first, I guess, pattern repeat, and I just knit some short rows in the back. So yeah. The other things that I changed was I changed the distance between these little, I guess they're like little crosses in the repeat. And I also smushed together this actual rug motif in the repeats. So I deleted a few stitches from each pattern repeat, which just meant that it was a little bit narrower since I'm a pretty small person. So as a result, it made a lot of sense for me to try and make it a bit smaller since I actually liked the gauge and the needle size that was recommended. I hit the gauge pretty easily, but I wanted to just make the whole design a bit smaller. For the sleeves, I also obviously I had a different amount of stitches as a result because of just how much smaller it was, but I tried to stay consistent. So you can see that there's two of these like big motif repeats on each of the sleeve panels or where I held these stitches on reserve for when I was going to knit the sleeves. And what I did was I added, I think, one extra stitch so that it was divisible by 6 so that I could get this motif in there too. And then immediately after this motif was done, I started my decreases. And I decreased evenly twice every 5 rows until I got to a length I was happy with. I think that was about 32 stitches or so. I'm not giving away anything of the pattern. This is a free pattern in case I didn't mention that. And then I just knit about 10 rows of ribbing, which is again not in the original pattern, so this is a modification as well. But I like the way that this looks. Another modification is the I cord in the contrast color up here. That I like having contrast near my face, so I ended up doing that. And for the bottom, I pretty much did it exactly to pattern. I think I did a few decreased rounds. I can at least see one decrease round here. And then I used a split hem. So you can kind of see that there's a split hem here. I'll try and insert some footage of me wearing it because I did think that, I don't know, falls at a really nice length. It's super woolly, it's very warm. The yarn that I used for this is a Nutidin yarn. Basically, I only really feel like knitting in Nutidin at this exact moment, which is also why I have been sort of leaving my sock knitting, which is using not necessarily traditional sock yarn, but non-Nutidin yarn at the moment. But maybe I'll knit some Nutidin socks soon. I feel like that's definitely on my horizon. In any case, the two colorways, while they're no longer available because Nutidin is, in case you're not familiar, yarn that they only dye one batch of that color, and then they put it out for the general public, and then if you don't get it then you won't have access to it, but they make new beautiful colors every couple of months. So as a result, there's plenty of other beautiful things to choose from. In any case, this bottom, this white, off-white gray color with lots of different watercolor flecks inside, if you see it up close at least. This is called Alchemy. And this other color here, this more brown black color, has little hints of purple in it, is called Skull. And I think that that's the name for like a shell or like a mussel. Those, I don't know what they're called. Yeah, mussels, the mussel shell. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. The whole thing is it just feels like a warm hug. I mean, I guess this is the closest you can get to a warm hug in terms of clothing, like a beautiful hand knitted jumper. So I adore this. I hope I wear it as much as I anticipate I will wear it. I do wonder if it's going to be a bit too warm for me, but I guess we'll see. So yeah, that's my rug, which is just, again, such a funny name for a sweater in my opinion. So, okay. On to the next project. I sort of introduced this last time. I needed a project to work on a school trip. I'm a teacher, and I wanted something to work on the bus ride for a school trip. So I really wanted to knit with Nutidin. So I took a single strand of that Skull color, the black-brown color, and I cast on from the cuff to make some type of, I guess, sweater was my intention. So my original intention was to make a sweater that looked like this, but I noticed I have a lot of, classic sweaters. So I thought I would do something crazy, and I instead cast off for the cuff. So now it's more of a bell sleeve situation. So I'll show you what it kind of looks like. Kind of looks like this, and you can also see I added a layer of a lace detail here on the cuff. So it's a little bit of a bell sleeve. It's not too much of a bell sleeve, so I still will be able to do stuff with it. I mean, super big bell sleeves aren't very practical, but this one I think I can make work. I also think that this pattern, this sort of scallop lacing, edging, there's a specific name for the lace motif I used. I think it's often used in Shetland knitting. I'll look it up and I'll try and put it on the screen. In any case, I feel like it goes very, very well with this yarn. Also, not all Nutidin yarn is suitable or easy to knit with single-stranded. This one's definitely on the easier side in my opinion, by comparison to other more thinner ones. And so I've knit one sleeve. And then because I kind of wanted to make sure that the bind off was the same for the other sleeve, I used the same insane method of sort of casting on. I should have used a provisional cast on, but I didn't. So casting on and then knitting to the same number of stitches, or sort of increasing to the same number of stitches, and then doing this, this scalloped lace edge. So I'm going to have these bell sleeves. And then eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off a little bit here and pick up the stitches, then finish knitting up the sleeves, until they come to my armpit, and then I will join them with the body. And I've already started on the body. I've made some considerable progress on it, but as I was saying last time, one of the reasons, so here's what I have with the body. It's on very small circumference needles. I feel like it was a missed opportunity to do the scalloped edging on the bottom again, but oh well. In any case, I might knit a little bit. I was gonna say, one of the things I really like about this method, so the bottom up method, is that it's a lot easier for travel knitting, and especially if you have knit a lot of, or at least some top-down sweaters, you'll notice that at some point, especially on Sleeve Island, it gets very, very, very bulky. And I think that that's why people call it Sleeve Island, because you're literally just like schlepping this massive sweater around with you whenever you're trying to work on your project. And the positive of, at least for me, of knitting bottom up is that you can avoid that problem. I have made a few of these sort of more freestyle patterns, or self-drafted patterns as some people call them, in the past, but well, one of them was very successful, but another one of them I made really way too short, so it was like very, very, very cropped. And so my main aim here is just really to knit a lot of body here, because despite the fact that I do wear quite a lot of cropped things, I don't want to have a very cropped sweater, because especially since this is going to be already a little bit challenging to wear with the bell sleeves, with the lace edging, I don't want to jeopardize its wearability by also making it cropped. So yeah. I had a question in my last video about knitting with Nudidin and how long does it take to get used to knitting with it, and also, maybe if I have some tips for how to knit with it. And while I answer that, maybe it's something that people are interested in knowing about. Definitely knitting with unspun yarn in general. I have some experience also knitting with, I think it's called Plutolopi, the unspun Istex brand Icelandic wool, but also there's a German company called Schoppelwolle that makes their own unspun. That one is very thick. I would almost classify that as a DK or worsted weight yarn. And my suggestion, if you do have a kind of a thinner yarn, this one's actually kind of a thicker one, but is to put it into balls first. So take it out of the plates. I usually take it from the middle and wrap it up into balls. This is very helpful for some reason. I don't exactly know why, but when it's all going in the same, my best guess at least, is that when it's in the plate, all of the yarn is going sort of in the same way. So it's more likely to stick to one another, especially with lanolin heavy yarns. But when you put it into a ball, all the fibers are kind of going in different directions. So it's less likely to stick, less likely to cause internal tension in the actual yarn or in the cake, and therefore less likely to break. At the same time, of course, I also change my tension a little bit. So my tension is very, very loose when I'm knitting, which works well for the type of knitting I use. You can tell I'm not a continental knitter. I'm an English knitter, or I'm a thrower, at least. I know that I throw. I can knit the other way as well, but I just prefer this. And at the end of the day, knitting for me is, again, it's like a comfort thing. I'm just trying to be comfortable. I'm trying to give my nervous system a break. And so I don't want to do anything that's going to be really tedious, really hard on the hands. Yeah. Another tip quickly is to put the yarn on some kind of surface that has less friction. Ooh, the sun is coming out and gonna blind me a little bit. Yeah, so have less friction, and so something like a plastic bag that you're sort of hanging somewhere so that it can move freely, not putting it against something else that's woolen where it could tug against it. So if you do those things and you're careful with your tension, you're careful that you're sort of unwinding the ball a little bit when you see that you're running out a little bit. All of those things will help make the experience very enjoyable. And I also think it kind of teaches you to be a little bit more patient with your knitting, but not in a tedious way, if that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of people talk about how unspun wool in general or less processed wool just has this gorgeous smell. And that's something that I really love about this. I mean, you open your knitting project and the smell of sheep and lanolin and meadows all kind of almost overwhelms you. The first time I ever got a Newton order, I couldn't stop smelling it because while I had used less processed wool before, that one in particular was a very lanolin heavy wool, so it was really incredible. In any case, I'm definitely going off on a tangent here. So that is all I'm going to say about that for now. You're probably, if you are planning on coming back here, you're definitely going to hear more about Nudiden because I have quite a few projects lined up with the new acquisitions I made in my last couple of videos. I also just ordered from the September or the fall equinox collection. I didn't order that many, but they had apparently one that had a similar effect to alchemy, so it's sort of an off-white with little flecks of color within it, and I couldn't resist. That one to me was very very intriguing because I really liked knitting with that. Oh, a last thing that I will say is something else that's beautiful about this yarn is just the variety of color within it, the way that it's dyed. There's a lot of beautiful nuances in the color, and it makes for an incredible knitting experience in the sun. So it also inspires me to knit at daylight or in daylight, knit in the sun more, which are things that I feel like oftentimes I end up knitting at the end of the day in front of YouTube or, listening to my many audiobooks. And I think this really inspires me to maybe still listen to my audiobooks, but at least take it outside and every now and then really marvel at the display of the colors that are appearing in my work. So yes, I am a total spokesperson for them. Not really, no, obviously not, but I'm a fangirl of very few things, but of this yarn, I am a fangirl. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Those are pretty much the main things I'm working on, but I do have 2 projects in hibernation that I'm going to be kind of taking out of hibernation. And the first one I actually want to talk about today because it's one that I couldn't complete without finding the appropriate buttons or zipper, and I have found the appropriate zipper for it. So this is the Spot Sweater. It's by Anne Denzel. I have mixed feelings about this sweater, but it was a very cheap project for me because it is completely made out of scrap wool that I got at a flea market, a wool flea market. It's almost exclusively either that or scrap wool that I had. This top wool here, this is actually the unspun Schoppelwolle I was talking about earlier, except it's at a very, very, very tight gauge for how thick the yarn is, and I think it looks really gorgeous. I hope I have a little bit less left because I would really like to use that to do the edging on this. You can see that I planned this with a steek in the middle, and I was originally going to put in buttons, but I thought I would get a lot more use out of it if I could find a double-edged zipper in the right color, and I have. So I'm super, super happy. Found a really long, nice zipper, so it almost fits perfectly with the colors, and I'm planning on attaching that. You can kind of tell from how felted it is, or maybe it's not as clear on camera, but you can kind of tell that I have worn this actually a lot already in this state. But since it is quite long, you can see I did some increases here to make the hips actually fit me at the bottom. My cat really likes sort of making bread or whatever you call it, kneading the dough while I'm wearing this, and he has sort of created some loose strings. But I mean, what is the purpose of knitwear if not to wear it? So I am okay with that. I'm comfortable with the fact that it looks like it's worn. There are so many beautiful colors in this. I loved knitting this. Well, I think I love knitting color work, so of course I love knitting this, but I loved how I got to play with color in this. And this is also not a color palette I would normally ever gravitate towards, but because these were the colors I had on hand, I ended up just using all of them. And I have a few extras left, but on the whole, I pretty much finished the majority of these colors. Yeah. So anyways, this is one of my proudest knitting accomplishments, just because of how tiny the gauge is, how long this took me to knit. And yeah, I'm excited to finally put a zipper in it because I think that that's going to help me. I'm planning on using a crocheted steek. And yeah, I will update you on how that goes. At the moment, I'm planning to do that. I mean, I've been planning to do it all summer actually, but finally these two things are in the same room, because previously this was somewhere in my yarn storage and this was in a bag because I found this actually on holiday. So this was just in a bag, and they finally have met. So now they know they belong together. So that's gonna happen soon. Okay. Yeah, and the last thing, I guess this is not knitting related. This is more just kind of reflecting, I guess, on my own life and what's been happening in it. Unfortunately, my family, we lost my grandmother this week, actually, just a few days ago. I was lucky enough to go back and see her right at the end. So we got a call probably about 2 weeks ago, almost exactly 2 weeks ago, that she had stopped eating, which is a very common sign in the elderly that their time is coming to an end. And again, I am in a very privileged position where I was able to go and see her. Yeah, it's been a very, I feel a lot of mixed emotions, because when we get old, as we get older, firstly, we're seeing a lot of our loved ones actually get much older than us, right? They're losing their vigor, their energy, losing their mobility, in many cases losing their memories. And this is a very tough thing to have to watch, obviously, but it puts things into perspective. And also it makes you realize that there's also sort of a purpose to death, that death has a purpose, namely that firstly, it's only with death that we, can enjoy life, the classic, almost cliched point at this point, but also that life should not last forever because we can't maintain quality of life at some point. So it's a difficult thing to try and reconcile, because you're both obviously devastated that you will no longer have this person that has, at least in my life, has been in my life for over 30 years. And I'm just so grateful that she was in it for so long. But also I'm just so grateful that what really towards the end was more suffering, because she had really debilitating arthritis, has come to an end. I recently read 2 books that really remind me of this situation. And by recently, I meant this year. And I've been actually returning to them a lot in the last couple of days. The first one is actually Frankenstein, which you wouldn't think has any advice on grieving, but there is a beautiful passage in Frankenstein where he loses, I believe, his mother, and he briefly mentions how gutted he is, how his world falls apart. But then he says something that really stuck with me, which was, why would I tell you, basically, how horrible it is to lose someone you so deeply love and care for? You will, if you don't already know exactly what I mean, you will experience it. So you'll know what I mean. And he says it obviously, or Mary Shelley says it so poetically, it's so beautifully. But that has really stuck with me, that this is a universal experience. And even if I'm going through the grief alone, or I guess with my family as well, I'm not alone in knowing what this grief feels like. So that is one thing. And then the second one is, I read a book probably about a month ago called A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. And this book is a very dark book. It has some very challenging themes. Most notably, I can give a trigger warning for strong themes of suicide. However, at the same time, it is a very hopeful book. And in this book, one of the characters we follow is a teenage girl living in Japan, and she is trying to write a journal about her, I guess, great-grandmother or great-aunt, who is a Buddhist nun. And what I think is just so incredible about the book is it really drives home the fact that opposites are somehow often the same. So at the end of the book, I felt, as an example, that I was both very happy and very sad, because I was happy for the characters and the way the things turned out, but the book really has a very melancholy note at the end as well. And yeah, that's also how I feel. I feel like that book really helped me come to terms with the fact that I'm both happy and sad. Yeah. And it's funny, the way that she says it is happy, sad, same thing, which I think is just so beautiful. It's funny, when I finished reading the book, I wanted to give it 5 stars, and then I was like, is this a book I really want to reread? Because I feel like for me, a book is only 5 stars if I want to reread it. And I was thinking to myself, God, it was so dark at times. Like, I don't know if I could reread it. And then this week I went to the library, and there was a particular part where our main character, whose name is Now, she goes to basically watch her grandmother or her great-grandmother or her great-aunt. The relationship is escaping me at the moment, pass away, because they know that she's ill and she's old, and her final days are there. And yeah, I went and reread that, and I'm just so happy I read that book when I did, because it has given me a lot of, I don't know if maybe answers is not the right word, but it has definitely given me some solace. So I don't know. It just reminds me that sometimes things happen to you at the right time, and for sure, the mechanisms I have right now to process my feelings are much, much better than the ones I had, let's say, 5 years ago. And definitely reading literature is one of them. So, yeah. Okay, that's definitely enough of me going on about that. But if you're still here, thanks so much for listening to my going on about, I guess what is really a common human experience, but definitely just a random person on the internet going on about their life and the struggles of being human. So in any case, until next time, where I will talk far more about just plain old knitting. Okay, bye-bye.